Your anxiety isn't a disorder. It's a warning system that nobody taught you how to read. And before you scroll past that, I'm not talking about toxic positivity. I'm not about to tell you to just breathe through it or think positive thoughts. What I'm actually about to tell you is what the psychology research says, and it genuinely changed how I understand my own brain. Most people walking around right now who struggle with anxiety believe one thing deep down: that something is wrong with them, that their brain is broken, that everyone else is somehow handling life just fine while they're over here replaying a Tuesday conversation on Friday night at 2 a.m. wondering if they said something weird. That's not brokenness. That's actually one of the most sophisticated survival systems ever built into a human being, and it's been running inside you this whole time. Okay, so here's the thing. Most people have completely backwards about anxiety. That racing heart, the tight chest, the thoughts that won't quit at midnight. That's not your brain malfunctioning. That's your nervous system doing exactly what it was designed to do. Psychology shows that anxiety response is rooted in the same ancient survival wiring that kept your ancestors alive when life was genuinely physically dangerous. Your brain spots a potential threat, real or imagined, and it goes full emergency mode. Heart rate up, breathing gets shallow, every sense sharpens. Body says, something might be wrong, let's go. The problem? Your brain can't always tell the difference between a lion in the tall grass and an email you forgot to reply to 3 days ago. Same alarm, very different situation. I love this image, honestly. Picture your brain as a security guard, incredibly devoted, slightly overcaffeinated, been on duty since the day you were born. One job: keep you safe. And honestly, they're incredible at it, almost too incredible. They're pulling the fire alarm because you have a difficult conversation tomorrow. They're locking all the doors because someone left you on red. But here's what matters. They're not doing it to ruin your life. They're doing it because they care about you more than anything. That's not a flaw in the guard. That's a guard who's been working overtime for years. Okay, so here's the first real insight, and this one hit me differently when I first came across it. Neuroscience research shows that people who experience anxiety tend to have highly active threat detection systems, which sounds exhausting, and honestly it is. But, and this is the part nobody talks about, that exact same wiring makes you more perceptive than most people around you. You notice things, small things, things other people completely walk past. The slight shift in someone's tone, the tension in a room before anyone said a word, the tiny detail that something is off before it becomes an actual problem. Anxious people make some of the most tuned-in friends, partners, and colleagues on the planet because they're paying attention all the time to everything. Is it exhausting? Absolutely. I won't sugarcoat that. But it also means you're rarely the person who misses what actually matters. I read about a woman once who spent years thinking her anxiety made her defective. She described it as having the volume on the world turned all the way up, permanently. Every unread message, every ambiguous tone, every look that could mean something or nothing, all of it full volume. And then she landed a job that required exactly that level of attunement, reading people, catching problems early, anticipating what others couldn't see yet. And the thing she'd spent years trying to fix became the thing that made her genuinely exceptional. I'm not saying anxiety is secretly wonderful and you should be grateful for every panic spiral. Some days it's awful, full stop. But the trait has two sides, and most people only ever get shown one of them. Now, here's the second thing, and this one is about what your anxiety is actually trying to protect you from. Psychology shows that most anxious thinking is future-focused. Your mind is running simulations, worst-case scenarios, rehearsals for conversations that haven't happened, planning for outcomes that may never arrive. And from the outside, and honestly sometimes from the inside too, that looks like catastrophizing. It looks like borrowing trouble. But underneath all of it, it's preparation. It's a mind that desperately does not want to be caught off guard. And here's where it gets real. A lot of people who struggle with anxiety grew up in environments that were unpredictable. Homes where things could shift without warning, where safety wasn't guaranteed, where love sometimes felt like it had conditions attached. So the brain learned something. It learned if I can just anticipate everything that could go wrong, I can stop it. And that strategy worked. It genuinely helped. The problem is the strategy never got the memo that things changed. You're still scanning, still running the simulations, still bracing for storms that aren't coming. Not because you're broken, because you learned how to survive. And your brain is fiercely, loyally committed to what kept you alive. Recognizing that isn't about blaming anyone or digging through old wounds. It's about looking at yourself the way you'd look at a friend and saying, yeah, that made sense. Given everything, that completely made sense. Okay, this third one, I was genuinely surprised when I found this out. Studies in cognitive psychology show a real correlation between verbal intelligence and anxious rumination. In plain language, the more active and complex a mind, the more it spins, because it has more material to work with. Boring brains don't catastrophize. They just sit there. Active minds connect dots. They project forward. They imagine possibilities. And sometimes they imagine the worst ones because they have the horsepower to get there. Crazy, right? I'm not saying anxiety is a badge of honor. It's not, and I don't want to romanticize it. But if your brain genuinely will not stop running, it's worth at least acknowledging that you're working with a powerful engine. The goal isn't to destroy it. The goal is to learn how to actually steer it. Fourth thing, and honestly, this might be the most important thing in this entire video. Anxiety lies. Not about everything, but it lies consistently, convincingly about probability. Research in cognitive behavioral psychology is really clear on this. Anxious minds dramatically overestimate how likely bad things are actually to happen. The thing you've been dreading for 3 weeks? Statistically, almost certainly not coming. The worst-case scenario your brain has rehearsed 17 times? Most of the time, it never shows up. Now, your feelings are real. I want to be clear about that. The fear is completely real. It's the thing being feared that usually isn't. Here's a practical thing that actually works. When anxiety starts spinning a story, ask yourself one question. Is this actually likely, or does it just feel certain? Because that's the trick anxiety pulls. It takes a possibility, sometimes a tiny, remote one, and dresses it up as an inevitability. Learning to notice that gap between what feels true and what's actually probable, that's one of the most genuinely useful shifts you can make. Small question, enormous difference over time. And the fifth thing, and this is the one that tends to hit hardest for people who've been quietly carrying this for a long time. You are not your anxiety. I know that sounds simple, but when you spent years living inside a brain that won't quiet down, that sentence can feel like the most radical thing anyone has ever said to you. Psychology shows that people with chronic anxiety often experience what's called fusion, where the mind starts treating its own thoughts as identity. I had an anxious thought becomes I am an anxious person becomes this is just who I am. And once that story gets locked in, it is so hard to shake loose. But here's the thing. You are not the alarm system. You're the person living in the building. The alarm going off doesn't define you. It's just information. Loud, persistent, sometimes absolutely maddening information. But information you can learn to respond to instead of being swallowed by. This is such a small shift in wording, but it's huge in practice. Instead of I am anxious, try I'm having anxious feelings right now. That's it. That's the whole move. It creates just enough space between you and the experience to give you somewhere to actually stand. And from somewhere to stand, you can make a choice, even a tiny one, even just one slow breath. So here's where all of this lands. Anxiety is not a character flaw. It's not proof that you're too sensitive or too fragile or just too much. It's a sophisticated system running on very old software in a world it was never quite built for. It's a brain that cares deeply, a nervous system paying incredibly close attention, a mind that learned, for reasons that made complete sense at the time, to never stop watching for danger. Does that understanding make the hard nights easier? Not automatically. It doesn't make the chest tightness disappear. It doesn't stop the 3 a.m. spiral mid-sentence. I know that. but it does change something fundamental. It turns a frightening mystery into something you can actually work with. It turns what is wrong with me into, oh, this is what's happening. And that shift is where everything starts. You're not crazy. You never were. You're someone with an incredibly active, incredibly attentive nervous system that has been working hard for you for a very long time. And that deserves some understanding, especially from you. If this felt personal, if you were nodding along at any point, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. This is the kind of conversation we have here. No hype, no toxic positivity, no talking down to you. Just real psychology that actually speaks to real human experience. Subscribe, because there's a lot more of this coming, and I genuinely think you'll want to stick around for it.